Welcome to the Young Changemakers podcast. I am your host, Megan Diaz, and this is a global Changemakers production. If you would like to know more about the programs and resources available for you, go check global-changemakers.net. Enjoy the show. Hello everyone, thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Young Changemakers podcast. Today I am very excited. I am joined by Vidhi Yadav and we're going to be talking about mental health, specifically about the stigma that still nowadays is associated with it and how is it that it impacts youth. So Vidhi, thank you so much for joining us today. And to get started, could you please share with us a little bit more about yourself? And how did everything start? In other words, how did you get started with your mental health initiatives and activism?
Thanks a lot, Megan, for having me on the podcast. It's so good to be doing this for Global Changemakers. So exactly in 2019, I got involved with mental health. Back then, I was a high school student, and today I'm working in branding and communications, but back then as a high school student I faced anxiety myself, and I didn't have a lot of support from peers per se, but I had a lot of family support back then. So while studying psychology and looking at my peers, I just realized that there's so much going around in the mental health space. It's just everybody facing that peer pressure, but there's no support, there's no knowledge, there's lack of resources and what to do. So that's what motivated me to start something for young people. So initially it was just a small project with your friends. You do volunteering, you go to schools, you go to counselors, you educate yourself as well first before giving out that education to other people. So that's how it really began, and then it became a whole new project in different countries with different teams. So it was more from a self experience, I would say, from anxiety that motivated me to start something called as Beyond the Bounds today.
Thank you for sharing that. I think if it comes from a personal experience, then it's also helpful to understand others. So thank you so much for sharing this. And I would like to hear also what your relationship has been with Global Changemakers. So what motivated you to join Global Changemakers, and how has your participation impacted your work?
So in 2020, as I started BTB, I had almost, I'd say, zero knowledge on project management. And in 2020, when we were in lockdown, I took a break from my studies as well, because I was coming to Australia for my studies. So I took a break because I couldn't travel. And that's when it occurred to me that, I've got time now, a lot of time with me. Why not just build it with structure? Putting a structure in BTB and sort of just thinking around projects, what kind of projects we want to do, how to manage teams, all the social media things, because everything is online, everybody has time, and social media is such a powerful platform, I'd say, even though it has got its own pros and cons. So that's when I came across Global Changemakers. I saw one of their post on Instagram scrolling through one day, and then they were opening for their project management course, and I looked at it. I went to the website, learned about the organization, and I think it was something that I was looking for that moment. And then sort of just inquiring, the team was really helpful, and I came across Gabriella, and she is so awesome. She's been the biggest support, and she's also on our advisory board for Beyond the Bounds. So every now and then she advises us still today. So that's how I got in touch with Global Changemakers. So initially it was just for a project management course, but little did I know that it will become such a long-lasting relationship with Global Changemakers, which has evolved so amazingly.
Thank you. No, that is amazing to hear. And as you said, it started with project management, and I'm pretty sure we will speak about it later in the podcast, but I'm pretty sure that it has supported you with your project in so many ways to have those foundational skills. And it's also amazing to hear that the relationship has gone beyond that. I think that's something that many of us who have been part of Global Changemakers programs or courses, we understand that it's not something that is just over when you leave the event or when you close your laptop. It's something that lasts for years. And yeah, I'm very happy to hear that it's also been like that for you. But
Yeah.
before we talk about your project, I would like for us to start delving into the topic of exactly mental health, awareness, and stigma. In many societies, mental health remains a taboo subject. That is a fact, especially among young people. From your
Yeah.
perspective, why do you think there's still this stigma attached to mental health?
I think there's like a variety of factors that I've come across, like working with volunteers, especially like coming from different cultural backgrounds. Like, let's say for me, coming from like an Indian background, this is something that we were never taught to talk about. This is something like that was considered as like a taboo. Like if you talk about mental health, you're considered as like a crazy person. So we were always taught to put our emotions bottled up and like just put it inside and not tell anyone else. And then other factors that I've come across is like, one of them is like peer pressure, like fear of judgment among peers, that you go or reach out for support, there's like a judgment. So that's why most people do not seek support at that point. And also I think the main factor and or the prime factor would be the lack of knowledge, that not a lot of people know about what mental health is. That, oh, okay, I've heard of this term, but I really don't know what it means. So initially when I started with Beyond the Bounds, this used to be my first question to people when we used to have like workshops or booths, that what do you know about mental health? And then people used to be like, oh, we don't know actually much about mental health. We think like only crazy people talk about mental health. So this was something very surprising to me. And then I was like, okay, we have to start with the basics. That mental health is something like as important as your physical health. Like, this is as simple as that you go to a doctor for your normal physical checkup. Your mental health is same. That, because that's your emotional well-being, because your day-to-day decisions are based on that. So I think these are the different factors that basically resist people from seeking support. Lack of knowledge, like peer pressure, judgments, and in some cultures, like, you're not allowed to like bottle, like express your emotions and just basically bottle up.
Definitely, lack of knowledge and peer pressure are one of the main factors that contribute to this stigma. And in this regard, what steps do you think can be taken to address it?
I think the first step would always be listening, like be an active listener. Like when someone's coming to you for a support, or like when a friend is in need, you need to actually listen up rather than just judging or putting your opinions forward. This is what I have personally come across, and I'm pretty sure there would be like people coming across with different scenarios, different experiences, but this is what I have like experienced in my teenage years. Like, my peers not listening well and just like assuming things. So the number one step would be like, don't be judgmental, just listen to someone, because at times all the person needs is like just listen. Like, they just want to express their thoughts, they just want to speak up, and the other person has just to listen. Number two would be like, don't restrict yourself. Just go out and educate yourself before you say something. Like, if you do not know the term mental health, so rather than just putting the judgment out there or putting some statements out there which are not fact-checked, so educate yourself, read about mental health, read about statistics. And COVID was the time when mental health came forward and people realized how important this is, because everyone was in lockdown in different places, and I'm sure there would be different people in different areas, away from family, away from friends, and that's when you realize that, okay, mental health is important. So I think these two things I would say would most contribute in eradicating stigma around mental health.
Definitely, I couldn't agree more. I would just like to highlight what you said about educating yourself, because in my perspective is that sometimes mental health is sort of invisibilized because it's not something that you can easily see as another situation. Maybe like if you have a cold, you see that you're like sneezing all the time, or if there's any other like physical condition that is visibly very easily seen, it's more easy to detect that there is something wrong. And with mental health, it's sometimes visible, but not as much as with other physical conditions. So I think it is something important to educate each other and to listen, as you mentioned, no?
Yeah, because what you do, like, you know, like, for example, you have like different moods across the day. Some days you would be feeling like 100% of your motivation, and some days you would be feeling 20 or 10, which is absolutely fine. Because not every day you would be at your highest self, and not every day you would be at your lowest self. So it's come down to their individual, like, I would say, steps that they take to maintain them or just improve their mental health, just de-stress or just fight the anxiety. It's just seeking out support from family. For me, it's always been like calling my family after the end of the day, no matter what. And I think even families play a very huge role in this with peers, like families also, like in some cultures, family being judgmental too. It is also important, because my mom's a counselor for kids, like for students, and often she come across like parents not listening to their kids, and that's what she always advised them, to listen to your kids, because sometimes that's what they want or they expect from their parents, just to listen to them. So my mom also like shares a lot of thoughts about BDP, like what we should do. So even she's one of her, like, I'd say, like a silent advisor, which not many people know about. But even she, because she has experienced that relationships with students and parents, so she advised us on what kind of events or programs to do, how to move forward, helps us understand the target audience that we are actually looking for.
Yes, absolutely. I think listening is so important, and especially it's something that sounds very simple, like just listen, but it's not. I think in this world it's very hard to find people that actually listen to you. It's just like everyone can make this experiment. Start speaking to anyone, like a friend or at home, and just it takes maybe less than 5 minutes before that other person starts looking at their phones, or like the conversation changes to something. So I think it's something that sounds very simple. Unfortunately, I think it's not, but then I think it's a wonderful advice. So just emphasizing that even if it sounds simple, like, oh, like Vidhi is just recommending us to listen, no, she's actually recommending you to actively listen and to exactly to pay attention to what other people are saying, not just like, yeah, I hear you, but actually understanding what that person is referring to, what that person is really meaning to say. So yeah, again, thank you so much for this answer. And going back to stigma, do you think there's any other factors that beyond that deter people, and especially young people, from seeking help or information about mental health? I ask this because I think about the fact that sometimes having access to mental health is difficult, and I think in some contexts is actually very expensive to have access to mental health. So in this line, do you think this is something that happens? Are there any other factors that you think stop people from looking for mental health?
Yeah, of course, like for young people, it's always going to be like economical factors of like accessing mental health support. Like for, let's say, for Asian countries from where I come, therapy is expensive and not a lot of people can afford it. Whereas I compare that to Australia, a lot of people can afford it, because there's a difference between people's situations, their jobs, their cultures, their environment altogether. So definitely there's a huge factor secondary when it comes to accessing support in accessing support for mental health facilities. Also, I would say that shortage of skills is something can also prevent people from seeking mental health support. Like I don't think that a lot of people in Asian culture would be happy to do a psychology degree. I'm sure the times would have changed, but like pre-COVID that I'm talking about, not a lot of people knew about psychology as a discipline or as a degree, or do not consider it as a career option. So all career options that we have is like engineers, lawyers, because they consider it as a high paying job. So shortage of skills is something that also I would say can also prevent people from seeking mental health support, because if there are not many psychologists, then there's a shortage of skills, and then the prices would rise again. So there's a whole lot of economics going on.
That's so interesting. Yeah, I actually never really thought about like the whole economic relationship, yeah, about associated with the stigma towards mental health and the effects that it has. But it's impressive and it's true.
That's definitely coming from my marketing self, because that's what I do at work mostly. But yeah, I did like with BDP, I'm always reading things. So I'm always on top of news, like, okay, psychology degree, all that thing. And then people also ask me this very great question, that why didn't you do a psychology degree? So I wanted to do it, but my life situations didn't really happen that way that would allow me to do a psychology degree. And eventually I just took a whole new different part of like marketing and communications. But I always educate myself on that psychology part as and when I can. So that's something I came across. And also talking with my lecturers in psychology discipline, that what are the major factors, and that's when she told me that not a lot of people pursue psychology as a degree. So it just increases like shortage of skills in that area, and then the whole economics, just the kind of supply and demand, like the demand's rising, but there's not many psychologists to just deliver the service.
Thank you again for sharing this. And well, we're speaking about a situation in which we live, right? Like there's a lot of things that we wish were different, and I would like to look forward into a world or a situation that is better for mental health. So in this regard, I would like to ask you, to you, what does a society with comprehensive mental health look like? And what would be an expected behavior? For example, should we have checkups once a year for our mental health, just like we do with like or other types of like health? For example, usually there's a trend to go like every year and have like blood tests or any other type of examinations. Do you think it should be like that? What is your take on this?
That's a very good question, actually, because this is something we did with BDP as well. So we used to do like a 6-month checkup, like a mental health checkup and like a survey. And the results were like very interesting, like before COVID that we did. So we had like 37% people not knowing, there is access to mental health services available on campus. So at that point, I was starting with I was in process of starting with my degree at Curtin. So I just did like a normal survey with people, like what are their thoughts. And then when I started with my degree, I did a survey again. And then we also simultaneously did a mental health checkup as well. So I would recommend like, if you can do it like a year checkup or even a 6-month checkup would be appropriate. Just do it, fill out the survey. The survey would give you the results to understand yourself better. And then because the questionnaires help you understand your emotions and where you stand. And I myself have filled it. And at that point, I didn't know that, okay, I had like too much of anxiety. I was taking too much of stress. So it's good to have like a regular checkup. Second, I would say always have exercise. Just do any form of exercise. Like if you don't want to do a survey, don't want to do a checkup, if you think it's like too expensive, reach out to friends, families when needed for support, exercise, do some physical activities, do some hobbies apart from work and studies to keep yourself distracted as well, but also manage your stress. And also manage your emotions as well. So this is something I practice myself personally, like not every day, but I always try to make some time for myself, like trying out different things. Recently I've been on a trip to different gyms to try like Pilates and how it looks like in different gyms. So this is something I have discovered, that I want to do something apart from work, and I want to try out new hobbies. So my partner and I used to like do weekend trips on beaches during the summer. So for me, this is the best way to de-stress. So I think in an ideal or comprehensive world, this is the steps you need to take to manage yourselves. And again, what works for me might not work for you, and what works for you might not work for me. So it's all about just spending a little bit time with yourself and understanding yourself better.
Absolutely. Thank you. I think it all comes back to understanding who you are, which is something that, again, sounds easy, but it's not.
No, it's like, trust me, my mom says like it's like a whole long process. It's not like a one day or a two, but always enjoy your own company. Like if you leave me alone in a room, I would still be happy with my own company. So that's the kind of understanding you need to have with yourself, and you would discover yourself at different ages, different timelines. For some it would be early, for some it would be like midlife, for some it would be later, but that doesn't mean you are late. Okay, you are where you are supposed to be. The timing is always right. So never question the timing or compare yourself with another person's journey, because we all are different at the end of the day.
Absolutely. No, and I just wanted to add one more comment to this, because I'm 27 years old, and I still believe that I don't fully, completely know myself. And I bought a book. It's like a book that you can answer questions. It's not really reading. It's just like answering questions that are in the book, and it's like 300 questions. And yeah, by page you find like maybe 15 questions, and it's asking you very basic things, like starting from very superficial ones, like what's your favorite dessert, or like if you were a type of food, what would you be and why. But then it starts with these questions that get to know you a little bit better, like what was like an experience that has motivated you the most in your life, or like who is your biggest role model, or what makes you happy, what makes you sad. And these are questions that sometimes but haven't really actively sat down and answered. So I think this is a very interesting exercise that I just did because I found this book literally like on the store, and I was like, that's interesting, I want to know myself better. So just adding to that point that you mentioned, I think this is something that we can also do in case we don't really know how to start and how to know ourselves. Literally sometimes we can just answer these questions. It's something very interesting and fun to do as well.
Awesome. That is the most amazing thing I've heard today. But it is such an amazing activity to do. So I used to have like something similar to this, but not exactly similar. So my aunt recommended me to like when I was a teenager, I used to get affected by people's comments, and then I used to be like, oh, there's something wrong with me. Everyone has questioned themselves at some point. And she used to like give me a jar of positive affirmations, and then she used to tell me each day to pull out an affirmation and see it for the day, and then just understand it, and then come back to her and I'll explain what that affirmation mean to me. So I think that also was something really helpful throughout like my teenage years, that I was able to understand myself better, and then not comparing myself, even though I still do today sometimes. but it's got a lot better. So I feel like having a bad day, that's such a beautiful thing to do, like journaling and filling out those questionnaires. It's so fun. It's like so de-stressing.
Absolutely, and thank you so much for sharing that. It's just the fact that sometimes you might read this affirmation, or you might answer a question from this book that I was saying, and you are like, oh, I actually don't know the answer, or how do I actually feel about this? So it's so interesting to see how is it that we're learning about ourselves every day. And it's important to keep these kind of practices, just adding to this general question of how do we see a world that is more comprehensive and, with less stigma towards mental health. I think starting with ourselves and with these sort of activities, it's precisely a very good beginning. But I want to now delve into your project, because we have been speaking about mental health, about how to break the stigma, but you're actually already doing it. Like, you have done it and you have had impressive results. We're going to speak about the impact that you've had over literally thousands of people. But before we do that, I just want to make sure everyone in the audience understands what Beyond the Bounds is. So could you please share with us what is Beyond the Bounds? What are its main objectives? What are its goals? What are its main activities?
So, Beyond the Bounds is a youth mental health organization which focuses on destigmatizing mental health among young people. So, the name was actually suggested by my aunt, Beyond the Bounds, because the name itself means like beyond the boundaries. So, the boundaries that have been set for us, it's beyond that. So, the name itself was so catchy and so beautiful, and it has such a lovely meaning that I had to take that name. So that's how we had our name. And then we sort of we used to have like workshops in schools and like seminars in schools. And after I joined university for my bachelor studies, we sort of invented a student club model, like a mental health support groups in universities in Australia. And then slowly and steadily we moved to a similar concept in Malaysia, having a student health mental health support. So this concept basically helps bridge the gap between counseling services on campus and students. So as I mentioned before, not a lot of students were aware of counseling services given at university level. So this is what we do. We bridge the gap. So our events are basically conducted in support with the counseling services. So they guide us, they want awareness, student needs support, so that's where we come in. And then we also had another similar project like in Kenya. So Kenya, we have our activities in a UNHCR refugee camp. So our volunteer has volunteered with like UNICEF, State of Youth. So he also has a lot of youth background with him. So overall, this is what we do. And I think over the course of the period, especially with GCM, it has grown immensely because I've come across a lot of like-minded people myself. I've learned a lot from people, from their journey and what they did. So I think with GCM, we have really, really expanded our programs. So one of the examples that I could give you is our recent one that we were nominated for the Shawn Mendes Foundation's grant. So when I got the grant, there's like such a funny story for that. So I've always dreamt of like doing a Wonder Grantee program for Shawn Mendes Foundation. And I reached out to Gabrielle after I finished my project management course and my grant cycle. So I just said, I'm interested in this. If any opportunity comes up, please let me know, because I'm working on a project. And with limited funding, I just couldn't execute it. So Gabriella, I waited for 2 years, and Gabriella said that there's nothing yet, but I'll definitely let you know. And then one day at 4 a.m., I got an email from Shawn Mendes Foundation stating that they are very much interested in our project and would like to have a chat, like a quick chat, to know more about the organization. And then in a couple of days, I had a meeting with them, and then we got a grant. So that was a very huge milestone for BDB as a whole. I would not say it was just for me, but for everybody who was working with BDB, because that grant made us execute our Rural India program at a bigger and a much bigger level. So in Rural India program, we give like financial literacy programs for women, malnutrition to children, and mental health for men. So with that grant, we were able to also expand our projects and programs to rural India support. So this is the kind of support that GCM has given us. So I'm really, really grateful for GCM being part of BDB.
Absolutely, and I think this story also highlights the importance of investing in youth-led organizations and the importance that resources and resourcing them actually makes in the impact that it can be created. Because, as I said earlier, and correct me if these numbers are outdated, but I understand that you have reached over 10,000 people aged between 13 and 25 people, and 25 years old. So this is a remarkable achievement. And yeah, in this regard, I just wanted to know, which are some of the most inspiring, motivating, or successful stories or impactful moments that have emerged from Beyond the Bounds efforts?
I think one of the programs that we did for women was something very remarkable. We got a really great feedback after the event from people that this is something has not been done before for women in rural India region, because of course it's a rural area, so there's definitely lack of education, lack of accessibility, lack of support, lack of resources, lack of funding. So I think that's why it was our main goal to target this population, to target the underprivileged as well, because there was a statistics in India that 80% of the population lives in rural India, and I'm sure there would be new statistics coming around mental health, and 70% of them faces mental health issues. So as soon as it came, I was like, maybe this is the right time to also expand our target audience and look into something called as a Rural India program, and that's when we launched it. So we initially launched with GCM's grant cycle during the pandemic, but since it was a pandemic, it was a very low scale event and we had like a limited funding. So with COVID restrictions in place, we couldn't have like larger events. We had to contain and have a limited attendees for that event. But with Shawn Mendes grant, we were able to reach like more than 1,500 people, I'd say, for that particular project. So for women's financial literacy is something that has been overlooked for a lot of the times. So most women in rural India have their own small businesses. Someone must be having knitting businesses, someone must be having like clothing, artistry businesses. So how to manage the funding for your own business and for your own self is something that we looked into. So we partner with like a local bank personnel to come in and explain them, and also explain them that why it's like important to have like bank accounts, having education on like financial systems in the country. So that was the highlight of the success of that project. But overall, we have like received a lot of feedbacks from students, mainly stating that the resources that we provide during our sessions have been really helpful, because we tend to explain it in a simple manner for someone to understand. So we use for kids, we use a lot of graphics for them to explain. We give them like role plays to play. And then we also give them scenarios. So that's something that we get feedback on a lot, that instead of giving it as like a technical or a clinical presentation, it's more of like a two-way communication, like with a role play. So it's like less about us and more about people and what they want.
Thank you for sharing. And if I may ask, when you were mentioning some of the projects precisely about, for example, this one about rural women in India, you also mentioned that there was a mental health workshop for men, and yeah, I'm just curious because I understand that there's definitely a gender component when it comes to mental health, and that it can have even more stigma for men to access mental health services. So could you please share with us a little bit more about what this program was about, what topics were covered, and what was the approach?
So we delivered in the local language. So the main idea was to just have basics for them to understand. So men being the provider of the family, like in a traditional family setting in a rural India, so they have a lot of financial responsibilities. So their usual occupation is farming, and when something goes wrong because of the weather or whatnot, they go through a lot of stress and anxiety, which is why in most rural regions farmer suicide is very common. And it's actually on the rise as well. So that's why we cater like how to manage stress, what are your different avenues of having like different incomes as well. So it was mainly starting with the basics and what are the emotions when you face a situation like this. So we give them scenarios and then we ask them, how do you feel in this situation? So it was more of an emotional intelligence kind of a session, again a two-way. So we make all our sessions like not one way but two ways. We give them scenarios so that they better understand what they are going through and understand their emotions, so that they can just adapt ways that they can manage their stress. So that was the main topics for mental health. And then sort of giving them again like the helpline numbers in the country or nearby regions, what support they have like medically nearby. So just connecting them to local associations, local hospitals for support. So that's something we also did in that.
Thank you. No, I'm very comprehensive. Everything that you have developed with Beyond the Bounds, women, men, tailored to their specific context. So again, congratulations for all the amazing work that has been done. Unfortunately, we are reaching towards the end of the episode, but in this regard, I would love for you to share your advice to other young people that are listening to us, young people who are passionate about making a difference, and specifically about making a difference in the mental health space. What would be your advice to them?
I'm myself learning, but over the course of my learning with BDB so far since 2019 to 2024, I'd say just be hungry to learn. I'd say hungry to learn. Okay, if you are passionate about something, just go for it. I'd say you would be scared at first. The first time, but you'd be able to overcome that fear once you take the first step. Don't let anyone tell you that you're not privileged or you are too young to do something like this, because I myself got comments when I started this at 17 that I was just a teenager. So don't let anyone tell you that you're too young to do this. No, you're not. If you're passionate, you can do it at any age, whether you are 17, you're 27, you're 37, or you're even at 70. If you're passionate, just do it. Things would not go well or not go according to you, then you might be feeling like, okay, I'm failing at this. Just don't give up. And just learn a lot, network a lot. If you're with GCM, make sure that it's a very long-lasting relationship. Make sure you connect with people. Make sure you learn as much as you can and make the most of this experience. Like, just don't get submerged into working, delivering the project. Understand your community. Have conversations with people around, and just make a long-lasting relationships with people so that you have lots and lots of memories to look back.
Thank you so much, Vidhi, for this wonderful message. And again, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing everything related to your very personal experience, but also how is it that it has evolved into this project that has had an impact not only in India, but in many other countries. So again, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you to everyone who was listening to us today.
Thanks a lot, Megan.
Thanks for listening to the Young Changemakers podcast. The show is produced by Global Changemakers, and it is edited and mixed by me, Megan Diaz. If you're listening on Spotify, make sure to tap the bell icon to get a notification when we publish new episodes. And of course, please visit global-changemakers.net to access our full archive and resources available for you. Thank you.